Imagine a conflict so massive that it consumed the entire globe. A war where victory wasn't just decided by bravery, but by the sheer weight of steel and gasoline. While soldiers fought on the front lines, it was the machines that carried them to victory. From the mud of Europe to the islands of the Pacific, American industry built the beasts that crushed empires. But which one was the true king of the battlefield? Was it the tank that faced the tiger, or the humble truck that saved an army? The answer might surprise you. When the United States entered the Second World War, it didn't just bring soldiers, it brought the arsenal of democracy. American factories stopped making cars and refrigerators and started churning out tanks, trucks, and tank destroyers at a rate the world had never seen. These vehicles didn't just move troops, they defined modern warfare. Today, we are ranking the top 10 legendary U.S. vehicles that turned the tide of history. We will look at their firepower, their speed, and the terrifying impact they had on the enemy. Stick around, because the vehicle at number 1 is the reason you are free today. 10. The M8 Greyhound. We start our countdown with the eyes of the Army, the M8 Greyhound. While heavy tanks were slugging it out on the front lines, this six-wheeled armored car was racing ahead, scouting enemy positions. The Greyhound was fast, capable of hitting 55 miles per hour on good roads. It was designed to replace older scout cars, offering better protection and a 37mm gun. It wasn't meant to fight tanks, but it often found itself in dangerous situations where speed was its only armor. What made it scary was its stealth. The Greyhound could sneak up on German columns, radio their position to the artillery, and vanish before the enemy knew they were being watched. Here's a shocking fact. Despite its light armor, an M8 Greyhound once destroyed a German King Tiger tank. The crew snuck up behind the massive German tank and fired into its engine from point-blank range. It was a victory of speed over raw power. But the war wasn't just fought on land. In the Pacific Ocean, the U.S. Marines faced a nightmare scenario, storming heavily defended beaches. Enter the Landing Vehicle Tract, or LVT, known as the Alligator. This was a true amphibian. It could swim through the ocean and then crawl up onto the beach using its tracks as paddles. Before the LVT, landing craft would get stuck on coral reefs, forcing Marines to wade through deep water under fire. The Alligator changed everything. It could climb over the sharp coral and deliver troops directly onto dry land. It was terrifying for the Japanese defenders because it meant there was no natural barrier safe from American assault. The ocean was no longer a wall, it was a highway. Surprisingly, the LVT was originally designed as a rescue vehicle for swamps in Florida, not for war. It went from saving hurricane victims to storming the beaches of Iwo Jima. But the innovation didn't stop at the water's edge. 8. The M10 Wolverine. At number 8, we have the answer to the German Blitzkrieg, the M10 Wolverine. This wasn't a tank, it was a tank destroyer. The U.S. Army realized they needed a vehicle specifically designed to hunt down and kill enemy armor. The Wolverine was built on a Sherman chassis, but carried a much more powerful 3-inch gun. It sacrificed armor for speed and firepower. The turret had an open top, meaning the crew was exposed to the elements and grenades, but this allowed them better visibility to spot the enemy first. It was crucial because it gave American forces a mobile gun capable of knocking out most German tanks from a distance. Here's the interesting part. Because the turret was open, crews often welded distinct roofs or improvised covers to protect themselves from rain and snipers, giving each Wolverine a unique, rugged look on the battlefield. 7. The DUWK Duck. Moving to number 7, we have one of the strangest looking but most essential vehicles of the war, the DUWK, affectionately known as the Duck. Like the LVT, this was amphibious, but it was essentially a 6-wheel drive truck wrapped in a boat hull. It solved a massive logistical problem. When supplies arrived at a captured port, they usually had to be unloaded from ships onto smaller boats, then onto trucks on the shore. The Duck skipped the middleman. It drove out to the ship, loaded up, swam back to the beach, and drove straight to the front line without stopping. It was important because an army without food and ammunition cannot fight. The Duck kept the supply lines moving when bridges were blown and ports were destroyed. A shocking fact is that the military initially rejected the design. It was only approved after a Duck rescue rescued the crew of a Coast Guard patrol boat that had run aground during a storm. It proved it was seaworthy when nothing else was. However, moving supplies is one thing, but moving infantry is another. 6. The M3 half-track. At number 6 sits the M3 half-track. This vehicle was the hybrid of the war, with wheels in the front for steering and tank tracks in the back for cross-country grip. The M3 was the taxi of the American Army. It carried infantry squads safely through small arms fire, allowing them to keep pace with the tanks. Before this, infantry had to walk or ride in soft-skinned trucks that offered no protection against shrapnel. The half-track changed the speed of battle. It was terrifying for the enemy because it was a Swiss Army knife. It could be fitted with anti-aircraft guns, mortars, or howitzers. The M16 variant with 450 caliber machine guns mounted on the back was nicknamed the Meat Chopper for its devastating power against low-flying aircraft and infantry. Interestingly, despite its utility, soldiers often complained about the lack of overhead protection, calling it the Purple Heart Box because shrapnel from airburst artillery could rain down inside. 5. The M18 Hellcat. Breaking into the top 5, we have the speed demon of World War II, the M18 Hellcat. If the Wolverine was a hunter, the Hellcat was a sprinter. It was the fastest armored fighting vehicle of the war, capable of reaching speeds up to 60 miles per hour. It was built for shoot and scoot tactics. It carried a high-velocity 76mm gun that could punch through German armor, but its real weapon was its mobility. A Hellcat could flank a German Tiger tank, fire a shot into its side, and disappear before the German turret could even rotate. It terrified German tank crews because they never knew where a Hellcat would appear. The shocking fact about the Hellcat is its armor thickness. It was so thin, less than an inch in some places, that the crew was barely protected from heavy machine gun fire. They relied entirely on speed to survive. But sometimes speed isn't enough. Sometimes you need a heavy hitter. 4. The M26 Pershing. At number 4 is the tank that arrived late but hit hard, the M26 Pershing. For most of the war, American crews complained that their tanks were outgunned by the German Tigers and Panthers. The Pershing was the answer. It was a heavy tank with thick armor and a massive 90mm gun that could knock out a Tiger from long range. It was important because it finally gave American crews a fair fight. They no longer had to flank the enemy. They could stand toe-to-toe and trade blows. The most famous story involved a Pershing nicknamed Fireball. In one of its first encounters, it was ambushed by a Tiger, but survived to fight another day. Later, a Pershing destroyed a Panther tank in front of the Cologne Cathedral in a famous duel captured on film. We are getting closer to the top spot, but first, the machine that carried the weight of the war. 3. The CCKW Deuce and a Half. Number 3 isn't a tank. It doesn't have a big gun, but without it, the Allies would have lost. It is the GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, legendary, known as the Deuce and a Half. This truck was the backbone of the famous Red Ball Express, a massive convoy system that supplied Allied forces racing toward Germany. Over 500,000 of these trucks were built. They were rugged, reliable, and could run on terrible roads in freezing weather. General Eisenhower famously said that this truck was one of the equipment that won the war. It was important because the German army still relied heavily on horses for logistics. The American army rolled on rubber tires. A shocking fact: the Red Ball Express drivers, who were mostly African American soldiers, drove these trucks for up to 36 hours straight without sleep, keeping the tanks fueled and the guns firing. 2. The Willys Jeep. At number 2, we have the icon of American freedom, the Willys Jeep. This small four-wheel drive reconnaissance vehicle became the symbol of the American GI. It was light, fast, and incredibly tough. It could go where no other vehicle could. It served as a command car, an ambulance, a weapon carrier, and even a chaplain's altar. The Jeep was scary to the enemy because it was everywhere. It allowed American commanders to be on the front lines, making decisions in real time. It made the army flexible. Here's something you might not know. The Jeep was so well designed that German soldiers loved to capture them. They would often paint German markings on captured Jeeps and use them in preference to their own vehicles because the Jeep was simply better. And now, the moment you have been waiting for. 1. The M4 Sherman. Finally, at number 1, the vehicle that conquered continents, the M4 Sherman. Critics often point out that the Sherman wasn't the strongest tank. It couldn't punch through a Tiger's front armor easily, quickly, and it had a tendency to catch fire. But the Sherman had something no other tank had: reliability and numbers. The U.S. built nearly 50,000 Shermans. They were easy to repair, easy to ship, and easy to operate. While German tanks were breaking down and running out of fuel, the Sherman kept coming. It was the workhorse of the armored divisions. It fought in the deserts of Africa, the jungles of Asia, and the cities of Europe. It was the most important vehicle because it was good enough in every category and available in overwhelming numbers. It overwhelmed the superior German engineering with American industrial might. The shocking fact, after the war, Shermans continued to serve in armies around the world for decades. Some were still seeing combat in the 1970s and 80s, proving that this design was truly timeless. From the agile Jeep to the unstoppable Sherman, these 10 vehicles proved that wars are won by logistics, engineering, and mass production. They didn't just defeat an enemy, they built the modern world we live in. So, here's my question for you. If you were a soldier in 1944, would you rather rely on the speed of the Hellcat or the armor of the Pershing? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.